This is Arnold Barboza Jr. He has been in 33 fights over the last 12 years and lost none. Out of the 10 fighters at the top of the ring's junior welterweight rankings, not a single one has gone undefeated as long as him. Yet, at 32, he's only now getting his first ever world title shot. And again, according to the bookmakers, he's the underdog. According to them, he should not have even had a shot at the title. He shouldn't have even made it to the title eliminator. Crunch those numbers, and less than 6 months ago, the odds of him ever taking that belt were around 4%. But you know why that didn't scare him away? Because he'd been playing with far worse odds for a long time. Ironically, you could almost argue that boxing was the plan B. Growing up in South El Monte, right in the middle of the boxing world with a father who was a pro kickboxer, it would have been the most straightforward of life decisions to just follow his footsteps, slowly go up the ranks, maybe use Olympic boxing as a stepping stone. But for Barboza, it wasn't immediately obvious that boxing was his true calling. He went almost a decade without stepping into a ring. Regardless, by then, he was no teenager. Anyone would tell him the days of chasing some dream were long gone, but neither he or his family were about to have that. At that point, it was time to go. No fights for over a year, and it was a sparring session that changed it all. One day, Barboza walked into his gym and there was Mike Alvarado. Just a year earlier, the guy had been the light welterweight world champion, but now, stuck in a whirlwind of drugs, partying, street fights and run-ins with the law, his reputation for being a loose cannon was seemingly destroying his career, and as he prepared to move up a weight class and go for the WBO International welterweight title, he picked Barboza as his sparring partner. Indeed, that was it. The first 17 fights flew by. Barboza was quickly proving that he wasn't just one more guy in a pair of gloves and polyester shorts. 3 fights later, he was already beating Manuel Lopez to that belt via unanimous decision, and so, with the commentator himself claiming that fight had just taken him from prospect to contender, for the first time in his career, he had the credentials to go out of his way and call out one of the top names in the sport. So he did. He grabbed the mic and called out the WBC light welterweight world champion, saying,
"Hey, we want the best. We want Jose Ramirez. I think that'll be a great fight. We can make it happen. I know."
But though it wouldn't be so easy, his next fight definitely shook things up. With Barboza looking to solidify his name among the ranks, they needed a big name, someone looking to go up against a newer fighter and prove to everyone that he was still very much in contention. So, in Barboza's very own words, they landed on a former world champ, someone you guys know very well. That man was Mike Alvarado. It was old versus new, a 39-year-old boxer that had spent 4 years dragging his name out the mud for one final chance at redemption versus a kid looking to make a statement. But as much as the two had a connection, there was no mercy from Barboza. 3 rounds in, Alvarado was on the ground, struggling to even get a hand on the ropes. There was no count needed. That man was done. So done, in fact, that was the last fight of his career. The future had arrived. On the back of the biggest knockout of his career, Barboza wasted no time, again calling out Jose Ramirez, Maurice Hooker. Even his father was calling out for his son's right to a world title shot. But this time, though he put his head down and kept stacking up wins, even with the pandemic taking over the scene and putting many careers on hold, Barboza had to find a real way to get everyone's attention. So, when he called out Alex Saucedo, he got it. Little more than a month later, he was back in Las Vegas, going up against El Cholo for the now vacant WBO International light welterweight title. So, when Barboza stepped into that ring as the underdog, going up against a so-called brawler that, despite his loss, he knew this would be a high-risk, high-reward fight, and indeed, when Saucedo put him down in round 7, that was a defining moment in his career. For a moment, it looked like that fight would become the first stain in his perfect record, but instead, Barboza didn't just regain control and completely outsmart Saucedo. Saucedo, he outboxed him and outworked him, not just showing everyone who was the real deal, but beating him up so bad that after the judges ruled unanimously in his favor, Barboza watched in shock as the doctors rushed him out of the lockers to take care of Saucedo, and soon, reports emerged that he had just suffered not one, but 2 brain bleeds. Regardless, no matter how much attention this brought Barboza, even with the international title to his name, after almost a year of wait, his first defense came against Antonio Moran in a fight that wasn't about to turn any heads to begin with, but turned out even worse once Barboza was unable to knock him out. Then, somehow, another year went by before he got into the ring again, and though, this time, with his opponent being Danielito Zorrilla, who was not only undefeated but had 12 KOs in 16 fights, there were a lot more eyes on it, especially with the Intercontinental title on the line. Well, after Barboza handed him his first defeat, he ended up, once again, calling out the right fighter at the wrong time. Barboza picked up the mic and announced that,
You know what it is, we want Teofimo, so it's either
look, at that moment, Teofimo Lopez had just gone from needing only the WBC belt in order to become the undisputed lightweight world champion, being named by some as the future face of American boxing, to testing positive for COVID, getting his title defense postponed and eventually crashing back to earth as he lost everything to Kambosos Jr., prompting him to step up to 140 pounds and rebuild his style. It did make sense to call him out, but the next month, he won his fight against Pedro Campa, took the international title that Barboza had just vacated himself, defended it a few months later, and by the time Barboza got set up against Jose Pedraza, no matter how high-profile his opponent was, allegedly a man who had only lost against champions, a former 2-division world champion himself, Barboza just didn't deliver the kind of statement win that would demand better and bigger fights, so only weeks later, it was Teofimo who was announced as Josh Taylor's opponent for his next world title defense. And to make matters worse, not only did he win and take the belt Barboza had been dreaming of, but Teofimo proceeded to announce his retirement right after the fight, baiting Barboza into attempting to, after all this time, set up a fight versus Jose Ramirez for the now vacant title, only for Teofimo to instantly come out of retirement just to spite him and Devin Haney, quite literally tweeting out that he wasn't gonna let Haney fight sorry-ass Barboza for my title. In other words, Barboza's promoters had handed him only 3 fights in 3 years despite him being a top contender for the world title, and had now allowed all of this mess to go down, landing him in the perfect position to be humiliated by one of his peers. It really wasn't looking good. And 3 months later, he was already in New York for his first ever fight in the East Coast, facing Sean McComb as the co-main event of the Ryan Garcia vs Devin Haney title fight. But even now that the opportunities were on the table, things wouldn't be as straightforward as he may have wished for. After all those years, with Barboza looking for redemption, guess who was also in need of some? Jose Ramirez. The former unified champion had never looked the same since losing everything to Josh Taylor right after that Victor Postol fight. So, with Latino Night going down in Riyadh and Barboza coming after Ramirez's manager, claiming that years before he had signed with him in hopes of getting his long-awaited fight, only to get ducked at every chance, this was a winner-takes-it-all kind of fight, even after it lost its title eliminator status, with Barboza refusing to keep paying WBO sanctioning fees without getting his title shot in return. And I'm guessing this protest paid off because once he dealt with Ramirez taking the unanimous decision, his next scheduled fight was indeed a title eliminator, a shot at becoming the WBO interim champion, the next mandatory challenger for the world title. Barboza was 1 win away from his title shot, 1 win away from revenge on Teofimo Lopez. The day had finally arrived. Whether Teofimo Lopez wanted to or not, he had 180 days to defend his title against sorry-ass Barboza, and as much as his reputation for thriving in chaos precedes him, it's hard not to look at that weigh-in, not to look at how Teofimo stepped in front of Barboza and how he slapped him as, in the words of the man himself, a sign of weakness. A sign that for once Teofimo may truly be scared. After all, the odds are certainly not in Barboza's favor, and it seems that's exactly how he likes it.